Revolution. My name is Kay. I am streaming to you from New York, and I'm here with Anita, Eric,
Hello.
and Lily. And today we will be talking about technology. Uh, what relationship does it have to building the mass movement? What relationship does it have to party building, politics in general? That is our starting topic for today, and we'll move on from there. So let's just open the floor. Any one of you can start. Uh, what advantages does technology grant us as party members, as people who are interested in politics? What can we do with technology that we wouldn't be able to otherwise?
Eric. Good.
Technology is very much like the printing press, right, for people in the movement. And it facilitates communications and it also facilitates the publication of documentation like websites and so forth. So it has, in that sense, a very powerful it's a very powerful organizing tool. Plus, it helps to build networks of people in the sense that you can have email lists that you send to who might not necessarily be members of your organization, but who are friends or interested in what you have to say. And you can also have Facebook and other kinds of social media to facilitate bringing people together.
So, and that's all very true. Anita, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Eric. It's there's a lot of routine tasks that can be taken care of much more efficiently with the kind of social media that we have available to us now, or the kind of technology. Just large amounts of information and finding information, preparing articles. I know for cpusa.org, I've been writing articles for that format and for other places for years and years, starting with card catalogs. And it's just so much, there's so much more information at our fingertips now. You have to be a very critical consumer of information to make sure you're looking at it in a realistic way, and making sure you're not taking in things that just aren't true, which is so much of the internet today is full of misinformation.
Right. What about that, Lily? I know we're going into a very important election here in the United States. And that is something that a lot of people are worried about, is the effect of technology on the election, because there is a lot of misinformation that's being shared. And we have new opponents when it comes to that. It's not just, people writing articles that may be false or doctoring one image here, another image there, but there are entire programs that are dedicated to creating false imagery, uh, making it look like things happened that didn't actually happen, that somebody said something that they didn't actually say. Uh, how do we begin to deal with that and make sense of our world through all of that, Lily?
I think that there's definitely a way to educate people using even social media for against the spread of like AI. There, AI pictures, AI writing. There are ways that you can identify, and that people, once you're taught basically the keys to identifying what is AI, because once you see it, it's extremely obvious. And that is going to be a super important part of combating AI and even false news, and sort of like where to get, it is super imperative that we enforce fact checking, like where are you getting this information? Is it just from your cousin's Facebook post? Is it from a site that looks not super well done, or has AI visuals. These are all very clues that are going to be super helpful when we need to combat the spread of misinformation. And again, it is why People's World is important, because that's our paper, and that's a great one that we can cite.
Mhm. Now, I believe we have an example that we're able to queue up of this AI, a deep fake, if we can get that on screen.
Can be done in a way that none of those failures of the past would recur, because just the physics of how it's built.
This is deepfake example of what is possible with powerful computer and editing. It took around 72 hours to create this example from scratch using extremely powerful GPU. It could improve with more computing time, but 90% people cannot tell the difference.
Wow.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what you all saw. It looked a bit off to me, but this is the type of thing that we're dealing with, right? We have computers that can generate these videos and these articles that look like they might be plausible. But we heard something about People's World. I know that the right wing has its own media network. Uh, Many of these networks pop up and they have a few $1 million to start their spreading of misinformation. Uh, what do we have in our toolkit as people who are trying to enforce uh, rules about, if you're going to say something is true, you have to have facts on your side to back you up. Eric, how are we thinking there?
Well, we're organizers. And as organizers, what that means is that we have to be really sure of what we're saying, and we have to understand things contextually. And a lot of the stuff that comes out of the right wing is lacking in context. So they'll give you sound bites and things like that that especially seem to attack individuals, but that's not what you get from the People's World. That's not what you get from the Communist Party. That's not what you get from face-to-face interactions as you try to do organizing, either union organizing or party organizing or community organizing. All of that organizing is heavily dependent on understanding the context for decision making, and trust is a big part of that, and you can't organize without trust, so you have to trust your sources. And that means for me, that means looking at People's World, because People's World is a trusted source. It is not the only trusted source, but it is a primary trusted source for me. And also, honestly, I strive to actually talk to people face to face and engage in that way as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Now, Anita, I remember a few weeks ago on the show, we had just seen a video interview between Don Lemon and Elon Musk. And if people go and watch the full interview, you'll see that Musk keeps on talking about, well, just go check the Twitter replies, or it's not Twitter replies anymore, it's X replies. Just go check the replies. All the facts you need are in the replies. Is that true, Anita?
Well, I don't think anything Elon Musk said in that interview could be called really true. In the sense, I yeah, I guess maybe what he meant to say, maybe what he was getting at was the fact that you can go back in time and look at various things. I mean, when you say when someone puts something out on X or Twitter or whatever, it's still called Twitter.com actually. So it's there forever, and it could be dug up and used, but it's in a mound of information, or a haystack of information, so it's hard to retrieve those kind of details sometimes as well. But it's just I guess it goes to how much information is out there if you want to take the time to really search for it. But yeah, that interview, I really do recommend that people watch it, because it's kind of frightening. the kind of ideology that Musk is bringing to this kind of technology. And that's really the danger that I'm sure we'll get to talking about here today, is the corporate control of this kind of technology. As Marxists, we know that's the crux of the matter, is who has control over this means of production, basically, and it's corporate control. It's private corporations, and not the public. So the public good is not being protected here at all.
That's very true. Now, what does that mean for our movement? I know that a lot of people are getting news about what's happening in Palestine through platforms like Twitter or X, through Instagram, through Facebook. Facebook and Instagram are two social media platforms that are owned by the same parent company. So, how does that affect our movement? Like, why is it that we're allowed to communicate sometimes and not others? Lily?
I think that there is a huge challenge that we face with the way that social media is censored and the way that it's done. And so there are five giant tech companies, right? They call them the Frightful Five, and it's Amazon, uh, I think it's like Facebook, Google. These are some of our large ones. And even through our movement, we're held accountable to their standards and what they deem is appropriate. And so it can really be a challenge at points. At any time, our media that we post can be considered offensive or rude. Such terminology that we use, that we see in protests, recently just got passed legislation as hate speech. So it's difficult to fight with that. But for as long as we can, you know, we have to spread information, education, stuff like that, because once people are educated on these matters, and then they see, like if they see us go down once we reach a certain point, people will look for us. People will try to find us no matter what, because once once you have education and a good stream of that coming in, that gap, once, if we're gone, if we get taken down, once we're removed, that piece can't be filled in, and so they'll always search for us. And that almost leads it to another process of like, okay, well, if this is how I got information, what's another way to get information? um, you know the use of state power to silence protest is facilitated by social media, and how we handle it and do that. I mean, that's how we know entirely what's going on, is through social media.
Right. Now, we're discussing state power and uh, our ability to communicate kind of being mediated by these corporations. But the party itself is doing a lot of communication back and forth electronically at this moment, as I stand. As I understand, we're going back and forth and having different discussions for our pre-convention discussion. Now, does someone here want to talk about how we're using technology to bring ourselves together and organize within the party? Anita?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think we did pre-convention discussion this way the last time as well. And it is, I have some documents from way back, pre-convention discussion for previous conventions, older conventions. And we had to print everything out and distribute it. It was a cumbersome process. And there wasn't this interaction that was possible, that is possible now, where you can read the pre-convention discussion contribution from a district or a club or an individual in one part of the country. You can respond immediately and say how maybe this issue is different in your part of the country, for example, or in your situation, or underscore it. So there's this dynamic quality to our discussion that's possible through this conduit of pre-convention discussion on cpusa.org. So it's really worthwhile reading not only what's out there but also what people are saying about it. And it will really help us. I know we've always said with our conventions that the actual convention in June is just the culmination of the work that we've done, really, maybe since February, early February, when we really started the convention planning and preparation process. So it's really an ongoing process that will be kind of ratified at the convention in June. So I think we're lucky to have this format, and for now, of course, it leaves us it leaves us open to the rest of the world, but I think that's a good thing. I think it only helps the CPUSA if people know what the content of our deliberations are.
Indeed. Eric, did you have anything to add to that?
Thank you. The difference between the way that the Communist Party uses social media and the way that corporations use social media can be summarized by democracy and collectivity. So when we are looking at contributions, for instance, to the pre-convention discussion period, which we're in right now, what we're looking at primarily are vetted collective contributions where we know where they're coming from and we know why they're there. We're not just publishing stuff that is not known. And I think that's really important because there's so much fake news out there right now, and it can be very, very, very confusing. For instance, you have a picture of Trump who seems to be being greeted by a number of African American folks, which never happened. This is a variation on other kinds of manipulation that take place. For instance, Trump hires Black people to come to events and then from the crowd say how much they love him and things like that, and they come up for a hug. I mean, this is all documented, and it's just so what is real? The actual objective reality is what we're fighting, is one of the things that we're fighting for. That reality exists, that reality is not something that you can just make up, and that reality is the lives of working people. And that so those struggles are deeply connected to, they are democratic struggles in the sense that they are mass struggles, and they're deeply connected to a sense of what is real. And the fake news and all that kind of stuff is anti-democratic. And I would go further to say that the use of social media can become very anti-democratic if we try to replace the collective discussion that takes place with just posts, because posting on social media is, number one, not the same as a collective discussion, and number two, it really brings out individuality a lot, and individual feelings are not democratic decisions. Let's put it like that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of individual feelings not being reflective of reality, we have the conflict in the Middle East that's going on. We've been talking about media and technology and the influence it has. This genocide that's been going on has been enabled by tech, from top to bottom. Lily, do you want to share a little bit about what's going on recently in the past few days in the Middle East?
I mean, what isn't going on over there? It's really, it's hard to see and know that it is a lot of American technology too that is over there to aid the genocide. It's hard to see a lot of American propaganda on what are both sides of the spectrum, completely favoring and ignoring social media and every sort of documentation from journalists and um, uh, everything that's going on. Iran had considered the matter solved from what I had read. And of course, today, Israel, or this very early this morning, Israel struck back at Iran. And this is likely just going to be used as an excuse. It's going to be puffed up. The United States is definitely going to use it for their own advantage, for propaganda, and really rally up people in this issue. And the only bright side that I can see to this, linking it to technology, is that I don't believe that the average citizen would have understood how severe this genocide is against the Palestinian people without the aid of social media. You are seeing people on the ground every day, real life, real accounts, and even if it's ignored by mainstream media, we see it, we know it, we can spread it, and we know what's going on. It helps us stay educated on the matters. And that's the only good outcome that I can see from any technology being used over there.
Right. Anita, what's your take on the use of technology in this war?
Well, I agree with Lily that it does help us inform ourselves about what's going on, but of course it does open us up to all kinds of misinformation that might be out there. And I know, there's a lot of misinformation going out from other sources like pro or anti-Palestinian forces in Israel. The far right wing in Israel is putting out materials that are fake sometimes, and just to try to justify what's going on in Gaza, or to hide it. So I really think it's again, we just have to be very critical about the how we're judging what we're seeing, and just be critical. We have to be mindful of confirmation bias, that sometimes when people see what they want to believe, it's more believable. And I think we have to be careful about that. But I do think uh, it is changing the views of people in the United States. It reminds me, back in the days of the Vietnam War, there was a lot more coverage, footage actually, of the devastation that was going on in Vietnam, and that was on your news, on your nightly news every night, where everybody was looking at three channels. So there's a lot of unity in terms of what people were consuming. Now there's a lot of fragmentation in what information people are consuming. So I think it's really something we have to keep an eye on going forward.
Indeed. Did y'all hear what happened at Google earlier this week?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Dozens of workers were fired
Hmm.
simply for sitting in the office and saying about Project Nimbus. That's the name of the project that Google is hosting, that supplies Israel with technology that it needs to carry out this genocide. Uh, they said, we don't stand for that. We don't want it. We work here because we believe that Google is going to be a place where we could spread goodness in the world, right? And
Hmm.
this project is speaking against that. And dozens of them were fired. Right. Google's slogan used to be "Do no evil," and now if you look around the website, you won't find that anywhere. But dozens of these people were fired for standing up for what they believed in, and several of them were arrested by police. You can go and watch it on No Tech for Apartheid if you look that up
Hmm.
on any of their social media accounts. Those are people who are speaking up against it. Eric, where's the peace movement? What are people doing about this?
People are doing a lot about it, and there's a huge upsurge in the peace movement, and they're using social media very effectively as an organizing tool. And I just would like to shout out the students, SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, and Jewish oh, Jewish
Voice
Voice
for
for
Peace.
Peace. Yeah, thank you, and other similar organizations that are really consistently mobilizing folks. And as part of that mobilization, they are using social media to get the word out. I think that the parallel with the Vietnam War is very, very interesting because as somebody who lived through the Vietnam War, who would have been sent to Vietnam, if my draft number had been a little bit higher, I would have the bags of Americans coming back were always shown. And so people were very, very aware of American casualties. And the result of that was to get control over the media by so called embedding journalists into the military. One of the things that we're seeing with the current struggles in Palestine is that social media has removed that control and has made it possible for people around the world to see what is actually happening, sometimes in real time. There's also manipulation of those images, but you can really see what is going on, and that has vast political implications. It has helped to make the peace movement respond much more quickly than we were able to in the Vietnam War period. It has also, which is also a tribute to the youth of the day. I have to say, young people got out there into the streets right away, and that was a awesome thing. But it is also important that it be sustained because it took 10 years for the Vietnamese War, for the Vietnamese to win their war with U.S. Peace support, and it's going to take time, unfortunately, for us to stop the struggles of the people in Gaza to survive. And we need to be able to organize, not just look at it, but organize ourselves to keep up that pressure that is winning change in policy at the highest levels of this country. Thanks.
Indeed. And that brings us right to our mailbag question, which I have here. I'll read it out so people can hear it. Do you think the younger generations will care enough to advance the goals of socialism and make the world better? Anita, we'll start with you.
Sure, Kay. Thanks. I think the youth of today really have a much more realistic and positive approach to the idea of socialism. Young people today are very critical of capitalism. They're the generation that didn't that weren't subject to the severe anti-Soviet propaganda of the 1950s and 1960s and 70s and on up. I mean, I remember, growing up thinking that there was no sunshine ever in Moscow because it was just always gloomy in socialist countries. So I really think they're liberated in some ways from those kind of crass characterizations of socialism. And then, of course, Bernie Sanders' campaign made socialism not a dirty word anymore. And I think young people today, we all want good things in life. We want health care, we want quality education, and we want a fair chance of putting food on the table and housing and those kind of things. We all want those things as much in any generation as in the next generation. So I think the younger generation with its better attitude towards socialism, more open-minded attitude, I think is very hopeful for the future.
Eric, do you agree? Is this true?
It is true. I'm really, 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 really hopeful when I look at the younger generations. And um, I just am excited, but also have a sense of caution because the terminology that we use, such as the word socialism, differs from place to place and person to person. So I think that we need to constantly be struggling to build unity, um, and with across generations and in the and among young folks as well. But I am impressed and I am hopeful and happy to see what is happening with the younger generation today. And they're asking incredible questions, fundamental questions about our society that have to be asked and that are leading in a more democratic direction and therefore a socialist direction. Thanks.
Mhm.
Lily, speaking from the younger generation, what do you think?
I definitely agree. I what Anita was saying is very true. I didn't grow up with the same McCarthyism as even my mom did, and she grew up under Reagan, so she was, she had a lot of experience with the second Red Scare. She lived through the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union falling, and that was all before me, and so I ended up the way that I am. And even this next generation, these 20-year-olds, these people in college that are didn't live through even 9/11, that didn't experience that insane spike of American patriotism that was extremely harmful at points. They didn't live through that, and they don't have to experience that sort of almost patriotic obligation that you have that happens in mainstream society when events like that happen, such as the Berlin Wall or even the Vietnam War, where you're supposed to have these sort of solidarity with your fellow American people, and you're really ostracized if not. I mean, McCarthyism was a horrible time for, the party, and people associated with it were really persecuted. And I think that really scared people off from socialism and any sort of, you know, buzzwords like that. But now it's become so normalized. People repeat it so many times. It's in constant conversation. Like if somebody tells you even the DSA, if somebody mentions that, people don't really blink at that anymore. And so I think it's great, not even for my generation. I'm a millennial, um, where we saw kind of the crux of that post 9/11 stuff, where we were growing up into that. But even this next generation of Gen Z, they also have a lot of education on their fingertips. They've had technology their whole lives. They never had to sort of worry about that kind of gap where didn't have access to education or connections. And I think that that's amazing, what happens to them. And then even my daughter's generation, that's after Gen Z, the way that they are in touch with the world and society is entirely different. And even at such a young age, they know what's right and what's wrong. And it's incredible to see how even my children are growing into caring young people who want to do something about society. And it's really amazing and important to encourage this, the older generations, the middle generations, and such like that. And so I'm very excited to see how it's going to go, how future generations in the party and people, even sort of on the younger spectrum, but are kind of going into these middle roles, these sort of midline roles where you're 30, so you're not quite the youth, but you are sort of the adult in the situation. See how they're handling it, because people start looking towards you for answers. And so I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I'm very excited.
And there we are. Hope, excitement. You know, that was a Henry Winston quote, I believe. Uh, the as long as there is a working class, there will be communism. As long as we still have younger generations, it's just like 60 years ago. People see the decrepitude that capitalism has to offer. where you have to step over 5 people on the street before you can buy yourself, a crumb at the store with, whatever you have left from inflation. Like all these crises that capitalism brings us forward through, it just makes the case for socialism in and of itself. And from there, we have to organize, we have to agitate, we have to educate. And that's how we move forward, no matter what happens. And so
Well said.
we'll sign off with that. Now, don't forget, we are in the middle of a People's World fund drive. We are still looking for several $1,000s. I can't remember the exact number, but we're a bit
Nice.
behind. We still have a week or two before May Day on May 1st. So please participate. Click on the link, peoplesworld.org/donate. And if you want to send in a mailbag question to the show, you can send your email to gmr@cpusa.org. We want to hear from you. So until next time, stay strong, stay in the fight. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Kay.